And there are closed captions for those who need them. Feel free to turn those on if you need them. So welcome everybody to our June Zero Waste Task Force meeting. My name is Courtney Williams. I am co-founder of WAS, Westchester Alliance for Sustainable Solutions. WAS is an alliance of community organizations from across Westchester County, all working to close the Wheelabrator Westchester Trash Incinerator, operated by Wind Waste Innovations and located in Peekskill, where all of the county's trash is burned and where I live with my family. So this is our agenda for tonight. I'm doing the welcome right now, and then I'm just going to spend literally 2 minutes talking about why we chose to do a program on the Cumulative Impacts Law and why that's important for Peekskill and for many communities across New York State. Then I'm going to pass it over to Brianna from We Act for Environmental Justice, and she's going to be presenting on the Cumulative Impacts Law, which its formal name is the Environmental Justice Citing Law. And feel free to use the chat throughout for discussion, but at the end, we'll open it up for Q&A and discussion. And as always, we will take action. So this is the Peekskill Riverfront, and this is a photo I've shown before. And why is this relevant to cumulative impacts? Because, you see some smoke plumes and whatever, but to the fully initiated, this is what you see. So you see 3 Title V emitters, meaning major sources of air pollution: the gypsum plant, the trash incinerator, and the BASF chemical plant. You see the defunct nuclear power plant with 40 years of irradiated spent fuel stored there and 40 years of radioactive wastewater leaking into the soil and contaminating it. Underneath, you don't see it, the fracked gas pipeline, the Algonquin gas transmission system, carrying a huge percentage of fracked gas from the shale fields of Pennsylvania to New England. You see the PCB contaminated Hudson River that many in our community fish from. You might look across the river and see the bomb trains carrying crude and refined oil back and forth from Albany. I didn't note the brownfield sites, the sewage treatment plant, the highway, all of these things right here in Peekskill. And this picture is why we need to care about cumulative impacts, because it's not merely one source of pollution. So New York State put out this disadvantaged communities criteria, and that basically was looking at how communities stacked up against one another in terms of their environmental burden from pollution and their vulnerability, like how well they're able to cope with that burden. And what they found, so highlighted in purple is my census tract where I live. And our environmental burden is higher than 98% of census tracts in New York State. And a big chunk of that is from the trash incinerator. But we also have that BASF chemical plant and other sources. But what's really important to note is that we are very vulnerable. So I'm much luckier than a lot of my neighbors who maybe can't afford to run the air conditioner when it's very hot because of their energy burden. They live in substandard housing or they're renters and they can't make modifications to their home. So this kind of score is why this environmental justice citing law is important to me and to WAS. And it's the same, all of these things are legal right now, and that is why it's so important for us to engage in this process, to strengthen this law, give it teeth, and make sure DEC, the Department of Environmental Conservation, enforces it. But this is kind of my montage of cumulative impacts where, just what's facing my community, right? So we have the pollution, right? The nitrous oxides, the volatile organic compounds, the lead, the BPA, but we also have, the chronic illnesses or the acute illnesses, the asthma, the cancer, the low birth weight babies. And then add to that the more kind of social, socioeconomic aspects like being energy burdened, an immigration status, a disability, a language barrier. All of these things are what make up that cumulative impact. So, our community is not alone. If you live in a predominantly white community, you're insulated from a lot of this pollution. You have exposed to 17% less air pollution than Black and brown Americans. So this is a problem across the country, but today we're going to be talking about what we can do to address this here in New York State. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to pass it off to Brianna from We Act.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm excited to be joined by all of you to discuss the environmental justice citing law. And just to clarify, it can be a little tricky. We Act has always been calling it the Cumulative Impacts Law. And so that's what we call it colloquially. DEC has taken to naming it the EJ citing law. And so for simplicity's sake, I'm going to keep it as the EJ citing law because that's what you'll see in regulations when they release them as a name. We can start. Next slide, Mary Claire. Just to give you a little bit of background and history of how this law came to be, we led this campaign along with South Bronx Unite and other impacted groups, just like Courtney explained, that we're feeling the effects of cumulative effects of pollution, and the social vulnerability indices that impact people's ability to engage with their lived environment and that affect their health if there is, for instance, a polluting facility or multiple sources of pollution in their neighborhood. So we worked to pass the Cumulative Impacts Law, or EJ citing law, in 2022, and the law was enacted as of December 31st, 2024. So it is currently an active law, but regulations are being created right now to implement and enforce it currently. So what is it? What does it say? What exactly does this do? And it does a number of things, but primarily it requires agencies when reviewing actions to evaluate whether that will cause or increase disproportionate pollution burden on disadvantaged communities. And it does a number of things. So one, it will, if there is a new facility that is being proposed, it will have a permit shall not be issued for a new project if DEC determines that that project will cause or contribute more than a de minimis amount of pollution to disproportionate pollution burden on the disadvantaged community. So for new projects, DEC will more likely than not, it'll be shocking if they do permit a new project to be sited in the community, but it's going to have an impact on the nearby community. For a renewal facility, because it also does capture renewals, a permit shall not be issued if it would significantly increase. So there are two different thresholds for pollution for new and renewals. But it will not be issued for renewal if it would significantly increase the existing disproportionate pollution burden in disadvantaged communities. Renewal facilities permit applications will be captured by the law if they are seeking an expansion or a major modification. And it will almost all the time, DEC will require that the permit applicants prepare an existing burden report for a new project, an applicable permit modification, or renewal of a permit. So more likely than not, existing burden report will need to be produced as if they're captured by this law. And then last thing is DEC will require actions for a facility to implement that are reasonable and practical operational changes to reduce pollution burden. If there is an existing facility in the community that is causing a impact on the disadvantaged community. And do next slide, Mary Claire. So which facilities am I talking about exactly? Courtney gave a great overview of what are the facilities of concern in your areas of peak skill. And I believe almost all, if not all, are going to be captured by the law. I have to take a look at it again. But we're talking about large sources of pollution and activities that may cause pollution. We're talking about projects seeking permits for water pollution, air pollution, think Title V. We're talking about the type 1 and unlisted actions that captured by seeker. They'll have to go through the assessments and see if they're captured by the Cumulative Impacts Law. So we're thinking big projects when we're talking about cumulative impacts and whether or not they'll be subject to the law. We're talking about landfills, we're talking about the LNG power plants, we're talking about sewage treatment plants. And so there is a lot on the table here to be regulated for facilities to be permitted and seeking to go through this process with DEC. Next slide. And so I'm gonna give a little bit of an update on what is the status of where we are in these regulations and what's to come. Recently, we just went through phase 1. And I think a number of you participated in that if you're part of this work group, so that is awesome. Phase 1 of the regulations in the Cumulative Impacts Law that were released, EJ Citing Law, we saw the changes that DEC proposed to the seeker process, and seeker stands for the State Environmental Quality Review Act. So this is where they were making changes to the law to better assess existing burdens and whether an environmental impact statement will be rolled out. How will that change that process? Then the phase 2 that's to come and phase 3 that is also to come are not released yet. Phase 1 closed public comment as of May 7th. WEACT led the public comment engagement process for us and our members, and we were able to submit long written comment along with other coalition partners. And we put out a bunch of templates for other groups to help submit comments themselves. And then for phase 2 and phase 3, we'll look to do a similar process. Phase 2 and phase 3, we're hearing speculatively that we can expect to see the next iteration of what DEC proposes around sometime later this summer, potentially mid-July timeline. And so in the interim, what we need to do is put together some thoughts on paper in anticipation of what to expect that DEC is going to roll out, so that we can engage as best as we can, be ready to go with what we think should happen when we're talking about what existing burden reports should look like. How should they be reviewed and be considered in permit applications? When should permits be denied based on what existing burden report data says? What is an essential need of a facility in the community? All of these are questions for us to think about and answer in the next upcoming rules of the regulation. So just to give a quick recap of what we did submit in phase 1, we can go to the next slide, Mary Claire. Actually, skip this one and the next one. The one after this one too. There we go. Yes, so the recap of what we did submit in the seeker regs was we wanted to make sure that the intent of the law was clear, that we are here to reduce cumulative impacts, that the word cumulative impacts is taken at face value seriously. We're talking about compounding multiple effects of environmental health, social, and environmental, health, and social stressors in disadvantaged communities. We're not just talking about one or the other. We're not just talking about air quality. We're not just talking about water quality. We're talking about all of it. We also wanted to make sure that the social effects of social vulnerabilities of people living in the neighborhoods were taken into account as well. How does pollution interact with their potential lack of healthcare, for instance? And then we wanted to strengthen definition of burdens, making sure that DACs, disadvantaged communities, should be presumed that they are vulnerable to new burdens and are sensitive communities to pollution. Next slide. And what we also saw in here was an attempt to compare disadvantaged communities to one another. I think it was not with ill intent, but rather trying to simplify it and to a point where it was too simple of, kind of saying that some disadvantaged communities deserved more protection than others. And we wanted to say that no, all disadvantaged communities deserve similar protections and need to be all prioritized under the law as not contributing more pollution burdens to any disadvantaged community. And we also wanted to prioritize pollution mitigation, making sure that lead agencies, which does include not just DEC, but municipalities as well, that they are trying to avoid harms, minimizing pollution impacts, and considering benefits only as a last resort, meaning that we wouldn't want a reason for something to be approved being that it's going to bring jobs to the community, right? Because we know that that's not a trade-off that communities really care about, and neither are they usually realized, is jobs being created in the community that are actually generating economic benefit in the community. You can't work if you're sick. So that's something we wanted to also make sure was clear. And next slide. Then we also did include some language about public participation. How can, when making decisions, municipalities and other lead agencies be as accessible to the public as possible, be trying to engage the community as much as possible, and be as transparent as possible, so that people can follow along, that they are aware of when decisions are being made, when public hearings are going on, when there is opportunity to weigh in, and overall, where are they in decision making of each facility and its decision to come. Next slide. So where are we? That was all phase one. That's what we did. That's a summary of what we said in terms of the regulations. Now we're looking at phase two. And phase two is everything I said previously. It's to discuss what is going to happen with the existing burden reports, what's going to happen with DEC decision-making in permitting. And so there is actually a lot of questions remaining. There's a lot of questions remaining around definitions, but there's also a lot of questions remaining around what are decision points and what would the community like to see. And so with the rest of my presentation will be going through what are the questions that we find ourselves asking when looking at the rest of the EJ siting law. And I will open it up at the end here to ask you all these questions. So discussion questions are to keep in mind. Unfortunately, they're not easy questions to answer for anyone. And what I would like to do is just kind of pick everyone else's brains if you have opinions to share, so that you can start thinking about it now when you're thinking about your public comment, when you're thinking about what you're going to say to DEC. We can work through this together, and it would be wonderful to have all of your input. So for the first portion that I'd like to discuss is that in most cases for both new and renewal facilities, so existing facilities that will need a renewal permit, an existing burden report will need to be prepared. But there is one exception that DEC may not to require an existing burden report if that would serve an essential environmental, health, or safety need of the disadvantaged community for which there is no reasonable alternative. So this brings up a couple of questions. What exactly is an essential need? What facility serves that purpose that is considered essential? What criteria could we suggest for an essential need? One thing to be wary about with this question is what facility might be trying to get under the radar is claiming they're essential when we know they're not, and that we know we can push back on that by potentially offering this is a reasonable alternative. If there is a peaker plant, for instance, that has been going on, turned on for a long time, and it's time to end it or retire it. But they're saying it's an essential need to continue to keep it on because it puts out X amount of energy. Well, could we suggest that a reasonable alternative is instead a nearby solar array or a wind farm? What other, or a battery storage facility? We would like to continue to think about these questions in phase 2. So these are some discussion questions. If you have thoughts on, love to hear that when we open it. And then next slide. And then I also want to talk about a vision for an existing burden report. This is going to be very essential because when we talk about existing burden reports, they will be produced by the lead agency, municipality, the facility themselves, basically the permit applicant that is looking to apply and is captured by this law. They'll be the ones doing the existing burden report. And so it's what DEC and DOH need to do is put out guidance on what exactly should be in this burden report and how should they use it to help make their decisions about whether they're going to accept a permit. So what is in the statute that we know the existing burden report should include is relevant data on existing burdens in a disadvantaged community, environmental public health stressors in disadvantaged community, potential contributions of the action to pollution burden in the community, and potential benefits of the project. So all of these are pretty open-ended about how you assess them. And we can go to the next slide for what are the questions that we are asking ourselves when we look at this. Well, from that list, is there anything from the content that is proposed in here that you think is missing? Is there something like climate data that needs to be taken into account or for resilience purposes when thinking about existing burden report? Is there exposures to a particular pollutant or chemical that should be taken into consideration? And then when we think about that, how should DEC weigh this burden report data in their decision-making process for approving permits? The statute says that DEC should take into account the data from the burden report plus public comment. And but there is no real mechanism in there that we'll see from regulations, I'm sure, for how much they should take into account this data and the public comment. And then what health service data, if anyone is aware, that's publicly collected by health agencies across the state can we point to for municipalities and facilities to put together a public health stressor scan? That's something that is in here, is that there will need to be scans of stressors, environmental and public health borne by the community. But what is out there? What's publicly available that you think would be good to point to say that here, this is where people can get this data from, where they can look to, so that that's something that's feasible, right? Something we can make sure happens, that we can make sure is something that people can do in their own assessments of. And then the third question is just more open-ended. Basically anything else. What process would you like to see happen? What are transparency mechanisms and what opportunities for public engagement should be provided? This is more open-ended kind of catch-all to see if there's anything else. So that you wanted to discuss, bring up, discuss, and any comments and questions. So go to one last slide. Oh, okay, yeah. So when you're thinking about your public comment, I lied, there's not one last slide, there's two. It's important to think about you yourselves are your experts of your community. And when you're writing your public comment, it's really crucial that you provide DEC regional context. Courtney did a great example of giving that context of where all the facilities of concern in your neighborhood. What is your knowledge of what your community health status is? What are the high rates of cancer and asthma? What is your personal experience with pollution burden? All of these are really crucial and important to tell DEC because they won't know unless you tell them. And it's crucial that we have as much on the administrative record as possible so that in the future we can point back to it and say, there it was in public comment and hold them accountable. Next question, next slide. And then a little bit of what's next or what's to come. So phase 2, as I mentioned, is not open for public comment yet. It's sometime later this summer. We will be continuing to work with groups across the state on engagement and community to do public education workshops and engagements. So if you know a group that would be interested or would like to work with us next, feel free to let us know. And if Carla, or if you have that short survey link that you want to put in the chat, that would be great. And then when phase 2 regs are released, we'll do a similar process that we did the first time. We'll put out public comment templates for environmental groups to submit their own comments, just to give you a place to start. Then we'll also be doing trainings for speaking at public hearings that you can invite all your friends to so they can feel prepared to engage in the public hearing that DEC releases. There will also be an easier lift for a one-click tool for people to submit letters if they're concerned about pollution in their neighborhood with as little expertise needed as possible. And then we did last time that we're probably gonna do again is a sign-on letter for legislators that are really busy and care about this issue, but want to engage and tell DEC what they think about this regulation. So one more slide, Mary Claire. If you're also interested, WEAC does have a podcast. It's available to listen to at weac.org/podcast. We have an episode on cumulative impacts featuring Dr. Nikki Sheets. If you're interested in learning a little bit more background and history, that's a good thing to check out there. It's a good episode. And yeah, I think I'm done with my presentation. I'd love to open it to Q&A. I see a lot of comments that I was not able to field in my looking at the slides and back at folks. But I will, pause it there. And if we need to pull up the discussion questions, or I can drop them in the chat if that makes it easier if we want to talk to each other, we can do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I was in the chat. For sure. So folks, feel free to raise your hands or, put your question in the chat so we can have our discussion. I think one of the things, so by training, I'm a scientist, and one of the things that really frustrates me is that the science of a lot of these, like the modeling of the pollution and the kinds of monitoring that they do, and is really shoddy. Like I would not be able to publish that. That would not pass peer review in any scientific journal that's worth reading. And, I think certainly we know Wheelabrator or Wind Waste has already got their crummy data packaged up and saying that their permit renewal won't have any impact on our community, which it is the largest industrial air polluter in the whole of Westchester County. Yet they are using a DEC model, and the monitoring data that they send to DEC, and they're using it to say there's no impact, which is quite literally impossible. And that's just for the things that they do measure, never mind all the stuff that they don't. So like, I definitely feel like there's a need for more rigorous science here. And, I think, again, like always, the burden is on the community to like tell them about the health impacts. And it's like, why does, like, well, I happen to have a PhD, but like, why otherwise would some random resident of Peekskill need to be parsing public health data to get the answers to like what are the health impacts? So I'm wondering, like, comments about, or, in turn, like, I feel like the communities need resources to fight back. Wheelbrader makes $1 billion a year. And so they can hire whatever scientist will, doesn't care about their scientific reputation to come up with the data. So I'm just wondering, like, what are our options, or is this a line of comment that we act as aware of, or what resources are available to communities um, to kind of push back on this shoddy science?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in the public comment periods, I would encourage anyone that is seeing shoddy science, calling that out, because what is out is still able to be taken back into consideration, and community comments will need to be taken into consideration. And so, yes, when you are seeing something you disagree with, I would encourage you to put it in a comment. And I think what people tend to get tripped up on is thinking about the perfect comment too. Like, comments are there for public engagement, and even if you're not writing what might feel like a perfect comment, the more comments that you put in, it's open to the public. That's what it's there for. Please take advantage of that opportunity in the regulations process. But in terms of communities fighting back against facilities on their own and things that are not right, that's taking place in the community themselves. Continuing to engage within continuing to organize, continuing to tell your local representatives, setting up meetings with your local representatives, city council, and state, to talk about this being an issue and how can they help you engage with the agency responsible for that permit on getting it shut down. Maybe they can force them to open a public comment period, bring the facility to the table. There's just so many ways that would take public pressure. And sorry, Courtney, is that a question for me, for the public comment?
It's just, it can be in the chat, because Jackie's had her hand up. So Jackie, go ahead.
Thanks, and I'm so glad to be here tonight. Several years ago, I was heavily involved in I think it was the Climate Action Council. Is this coming out of that? Or is this something entirely separate? Because that was primarily about disadvantaged communities and the burdens of pollution.
Yeah, thanks, Jacqueline. So I also wanted to introduce Nikki Cross, and Nikki is going to help me with some Q&A as well. So I'll pause and I'll go answer your question, Jacqueline.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Nikki Cross. I'm a staff attorney with the Environmental Justice Program at New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. And Jackie, in response to your question, we, I think, should make very clear in our comments that the Climate Action Council put a lot of work and effort and research into the process of designating disadvantaged communities. And we should make clear that the use of kind of the DAC assessment tool that DEC proposed that no one asked for is inappropriate, particularly because it divides disadvantaged communities into higher and lower burdened areas, which was not at all part of the process you went through. And we need to make clear that all disadvantaged communities are protected by the EJ siting law.
Okay. So when it's time for comments, I would love this kit that you're talking about that that has, you know, information. I don't know if it was like a petition or something you can be sharing with a lot of other people who may not know about it. I mean, there's going to be so many people that have no clue about this, but might want to put in comments if it's easy and simple, you know? So I would like to be able to, I'm like the only lonely person in Rockland County. We actually have 3 designated disadvantaged communities here. So that's why I put in the question about warehouses. But so what the DC is actually asking for is not what was supposed to happen coming out of the Climate Action Council. Is that what you're saying?
That's what we think. We think that they're almost designating half of the groups that you assigned as disadvantaged. They're saying that they're less burdened, which we think that lead agencies and polluters are basically just going to ignore whatever they think of as the lower burdened.
Okay.
But, you know, for example, by contrast, in New Jersey, the disadvantaged communities are the more burdened half of the population. We have assigned the more burdened roughly 35% of the population. So we need to make sure that we're protecting that whole group.
Okay.
And with regard to the sign on and petition, we've put out, I put out one of them in the comment. It's the org sign on. It's a little more detailed, but you can definitely draw some information from it.
Okay, I'm gonna try to open that and put it into my email. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jackie. Thank you, Nikki. Ellen, go ahead.
Good evening, and thank you so much, Brianna. Such an excellent presentation and really prompted a lot of thoughts and questions about this. I made some notes and, you know, kind of a lot of things. I know there isn't enough time to go through them all, but I think there are a couple of things that just jump out at me. And one is always the public awareness, the responsibility of the agency to make sure that the community is aware, that there's outreach to the community when there is a proposal or project or facility that you know, some industry is applying for, or even in this case, the wheelabrator, you know, with an expired permit, that there needs to be some real accountable engagement process by New York State agencies in terms of public outreach and ensuring that there's accessibility to this entire process, making sure that folks know that there are information sessions and public hearings and opportunities to comment, and that accessibility, whether it's through online opportunities, making sure that in-person opportunities in the community, and access to information and to the people in the agency itself. So, so much of this is always missing. And then that kind of, the other side of that is the transparency, the lack of transparency. And, you know, again, I come back to the wheelabrator because, and there's so many other Title V facilities where there isn't the transparency when events do occur. And there's no advance notification if there's any planned maintenance where there would be venting. but there's no notification when something is actually happening. It's very limited. It's not, it's just because people may smell an awful smell or they may see smoke, but there's no real public respect for public awareness and public notification and advance notification. And that's been lacking in state agencies, unfortunately. I'm thinking of the recent venting and blowdown events that have occurred, with the Wheelabrator. And the last point I'll make, and then everything else I'll follow up with in writing, is they talk about, in this case, air pollution criteria pollutants are always the discussion, the basis for consideration. But there are all these new emerging contaminants, and you touched on that, like PFAS chemicals, but also the synergistic effects. It's almost like they silo the chemicals, and talk about them in isolation, but they never consider the cumulative impact actually of all these different chemicals together as pollutants that are being emitted, or as pollutants, in a water supply, and what that looks like. But anyway, I'll cut it off there. And if you have any thoughts about anything I've said, but also thank you so much. This is really so helpful, and really appreciate the work that you've been doing and the work of WEACT.
Thank you, Ellen. Those are all really excellent thoughts and points. I think we're doing a lot to try and make sure that public engagement is top of mind and is a priority. And so I think that's one thing that we're disappointed about, and is a reason why we're doing these community engagement sessions, is we want people to be aware that this is coming, that this is something they should engage with, because it more likely than not affects your living area and lived experience with pollution. And we also are in the regulations, and our comments have put in some language that we think should happen in terms of what public engagement should look like. When we passed the the Cumulative Impacts Law in 2022, there was not as much of a process that is listed in the statute itself for public engagement. So one thing that I worked on a campaign is last year was trying to pass a bill that would codify a public engagement process and how it would work with the Cumulative Impacts Law in tandem. In comparison to New Jersey, who was the first state to pass the their version of Cumulative Impacts Law in 2019, they did have some engagement processes in their statute of the law. And in their statute of the law, even though it is in there, I've talked to New Jersey advocates, and still they're not happy with the engagement efforts that's taking place by facilities to hold public engagement sessions, and making sure that public comments are received. They're hearing that DEP, even if it's of importance to bring up and evaluate like a facility as accordance to the law, if there are no public comments, then DEP is more or less waving their hand at it. And so that's why we need to make sure that folks are informed of the issue, and are active in writing comments, because I think more often than not, DEC is going to look at that as an indicator of whether people are caring about the issue and whether it's something they should pay attention to. So we're going to continue to work on public engagement. If there's another bill that we are introducing into session to go in tandem with the Cumulative Impacts Law, we'll let everyone know as we continue to work on that.
Awesome. So, I wanted to ask a question or make a suggestion for what to include. So I put a link in the chat to Senate Bill 6833. This was proposed by Pete Harcum, who is my senator, my state senator, and he's the chair of the ENCON committee in the Senate. And that bill basically was a response to the situation we're facing, which is that within that census tract of mine, we have 2 Title V emitters, both of which have expired permits. So the chemical plant, their permit expired in 2017, I think it is, and the Wheelabrator permit expired in 2021, and they just remain expired. And because that staff extension is like indefinite, and there's no like date or anything, we are just permanently legally in a quagmire. There's like no action for us to take, and DEC can just continue this extension forever and ever and ever. And so like even if say like with this cumulative impacts law, even if we make something like stupendously strong with lots of teeth, if DEC can just never act on a permit and just never approve a renewal, none of the laws that we have matter, because all of these polluters are just held to their expired permits. And, so I feel like something we should ask for is like that language from that bill, which is that there must be a deadline, a hard and fast deadline. And it cannot be that these polluters can just indefinitely operate on expired permits, that there must be a do or die date, because we're the ones, when they don't do, we're the ones that die. We're the ones breathing all of this. So, or drinking it or eating it or whatever the pollutant is. But so is this on your guys' radar about these permits that are just indefinitely administratively extended?
Yes, actually, this bill is on my radar. Assembly Member Wright was just bringing this up to me the other day. He's our representative here in Harlem. So that's awesome that both of our reps are on this bill and sponsors this bill. And yes, I am aware of the issue of them needing to not re-up a permit and working off expired permits. I think there was actually what was it, a controller's report that came out a couple of last year. You're nodding your head, Courtney, so you're familiar with it. Yeah. We could probably put that in the chat. That took a look at all those permits that are operating expired on expired permits and should not be. And so that was something I think the folks that work on cumulative impacts talked to DEC about. We wrote a letter to DEC and the governor about that and how concerned we were. So I think this legislation that you're talking about, Courtney, is important and one that we can talk about for next session, how we continue to advocate in cumulative impacts and what that bill could do for our campaign as well.
Any other questions, folks? Jackie, go ahead.
Did you just say that there was a list of these? Because we were also working on the comment period that's for the 18th of June on regulations for the DEC of what gets counted and captured and how it gets, shared, this information. And we were really concerned about trying to find the list of expired permits. I think Ellen had said that there were over 100. And I want to just list the 100 as my 3 minutes. That's what I want to do. We need to hold their feet to the fire. They cannot get away with this any longer because of all the work that we do to try to identify the disadvantaged communities and forget about the level of how high someone's disadvantaged or not. This is all cumulative, and the DEC doesn't seem to care about the health of people. And I think that's part of their mandate, and we need to really, we can't allow this to just go forward the way it has been going forward. And also to kind of disregard all the work of the hundreds and hundreds of people that worked on the Climate Action Council, to just like weaken this is really a terrible thing.
So Jackie, I just dropped in the chat two links. One is to the comptroller's report. I don't know if it has a list of all the ones that are expired, and there's probably many more now that time has passed. But I also included a link to the DEC website where it lists all of the Title V air permits issued in the state, and you can sort that list by expiration date. And so like the 3M plant in Tonawanda that is at the top of the list expired in 2012.
Wow.
So you can sort, but you can sort that list based on expiration date and probably go backwards and see all the ones. But, you know, I'm just scrolling. It's like expiration dates 2012, 2012, 2022, 25, 25, 21, 25, 21, 25, 26. And that's the compressor station for the pipeline in Rockland. It expires next June.
Right. You know what? I'm having a very hard time trying to copy these things into my email. I just
Okay.
can't seem
Yeah, I
to do
can
it.
just ping me and I will email
Oh,
it.
thank you, Courtney.
Yep.
Thank you.
And in the comptroller report, there is a map here that will show you the facilities that are in 2021 EJ areas. So it's not disadvantaged communities, it's by EJ area, but
Okay.
it's still a helpful map to reference. And you can see information about the audit in the full report.
And that's in the audit, in the state agency's audit?
Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah.
Courtney, you'll get that stuff to me, because I'm determined to speak properly about this issue at this next little hearing. And I really feel for myself, the best I can do is to just run down the list, as many as will fit into 3 minutes. That's going to be my comment.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and we're getting close to the 8:30 mark. So we end every one of our meetings with an action. So, but I'm going to start with our upcoming events. So we will be at the Hudson River Music Festival this weekend on Saturday. And the link to that is it's riverfestfps.org. I put that in the chat. We'll be in the activist area with postcards for Ken Jenkins and all kinds of info and shade and a chair. If you need to take a load off, come sit and chat with us while you're there. We will also be at Peekskill Pride in the Park on June 28th, and we will be where the garbage is because we are going to be doing the sorting. We've got Anthony Carbone from Sustainable Materials Waste Management, who's donated all of the toters and bins. So we will be helping the event go as close to zero waste as we can with composting and things like that. But we'll also be there with info and other stuff. So come say hi to us there. And then for our action tonight that we're asking people to take is regarding the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act. And we've had task force meetings about this before. So this is really important because in Westchester County, a large proportion of what is burned at the incinerator is plastic. We know very little of what plastic is produced is recyclable, even less actually gets recycled. So it's all being burned and we are breathing it. This bill would go a long way in improving the air quality for us, because it would mean Westchester doesn't have to solve the plastic pollution problem. It would just reduce the amount of plastics produced, and would also take out a lot of the most harmful components of plastics, the most that cause health harms. So it's already passed the Senate, but Carl Heastie is not bringing it for a vote in the assembly, and he's the one that sunk it last year as well by refusing to, well, Hochul didn't help with her congestion pricing pause last year, but we need pressure on him. So call your assembly member, and most of ours in Westchester are already on board with this, unless it's Matt Slater. But you can also call Carl Heastie and tell him, bring this up for a vote. We're tired of waiting. This is urgent and we need your action. So, snap a picture of that or type that number into your phone and save it for later, and make that call, because we're running out of time in this session for this to get passed. And then, of course, you are all welcome to join our core group. We organize these events, the task force meetings, we go and table at various events, and whatever skills you have, we can put them to good use. I think a lot of people think they don't have something to offer, but everybody does. And we take all comers. So we have our core group meeting 6 p.m. on Wednesdays on Zoom, and then we have another smaller working meeting Mondays at 2:30 on Zoom. So if you'd like to get that invite, shoot us an email at waspeakskill@gmail.com. I think that, and our next meeting is going to be July 9th, and our topic is going to be fast fashion, because a huge amount of what we burn is also textiles. So join us for that. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording and officially end our meeting, but folks are welcome to stay on for chit chat if you have more that you want to talk about. So thank you all for coming, and a huge thank you to Brianna and everyone at We Act for all, not only this event, but all the other stuff we've done with you all over the past year. It's been great working with you, and we're very grateful for all of the resources that you bring to make it so much easier for us to advocate for our community. So thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting us, Courtney, and thanks everyone for your amazing questions, and looking forward to continuing to work with you to stop pollution in our communities. So
yeah, and I should say, if you are on here representing another org that would like to have an info session for your constituency, Brianna and company are kind of doing road shows to spread the word. So you can reach out and and I'm sure some people are going to put contact info in the chat, and you could have them organize something for your area.
yeah, Carla just put in the chat a link to our Google Doc that should not be onerous at all to fill out, but it will put you in our list of people to reach out to if you are interested in us doing something in your community or with another organization that you are working with.
Awesome.
You're welcome. Good night.
Thanks everybody for joining.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Lila is on here as well. She's our legal person. So Lila, you were able to, I took some notes so we can work on our comments when the time comes.
Good.
All right. Thanks
Yeah.
all.
All right, night.